Let's move on to the next session, which will be shared by Dr. Annie Nithya, Assistant Professor, Nesimani Memorial Christian College, Matandam. She has years of teaching experience and her area of specialization is diaspora writing. She is interested in handling spoken English and has trained many professionals and junior teachers. She has published many papers and journals and seminar proceedings. Her area of interest includes African literature, translation studies, and eco-literature. Good to have you, ma'am, as a chairperson. Ma'am, please take up the proceedings.
I'm heading the fourth technical session, and I invite Dr. Rasul Prabhakar to present the paper Madiga Literature in Dalit Literature and Emerging Trends. I request the participants to keep within 12 minutes. Please do not exceed time as we have already run out of time. I request all of you to keep it short, and I hope you will do it. Thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon to everyone. At the outset, I thank the organizers and the chairperson of the session for permitting me to present my paper titled Madhiga Literature in Dalit Literature, an Emerging Trend. Writing is an art in aesthetic sense, but writing is a mandatory responsibility in social sense. It is considered to be an art for mainstream literary composers, but it is a social responsibility to Dalit writers. It is the need of the hour to explore many issues in Dalit literature that went unrecognized from the last few decades. Dalit literature is a new evolution in literary circles, and it is a literature of protest. Dalit writings are not based on fiction or imagination, but it is from the experience. The four Varna caste system stood as an obstacle for Dalits to enter into the social sphere. Literature is a mirror of society, but the mirror rubbed Dalit images for ages. Any article or thesis is unworthy if they do not talk about Dalit Panthers regarding Dalit literature. Dalit Panthers are the group of Dalit writers hailed from Maharashtra. Black Panthers of America are the inspiration to them. Indeed, Dalit Panthers had greatly influenced Dalit literature across the country. But prior to Dalit Panthers, many Dalit writers explored Dalit issues in Telugu in 20th century and just before independence. Gurram Joshua and Kusuma Dharmanna and Boya Bhimanna are distinguished writers who wrote about Dalit life. The literature of Telugu Dalit writers mostly concentrated on national movement under the Gandhian influence. The writing of Dalit Panthers movement was translated into English. Dalit literature after independence took a great leap. And after independence, Dalit Panthers started to write exclusively about Dalit difficulties, neglecting national movement and the influence of Gandhi. Later, Ambedkar became the inspiration of Dalits and Dalit literature and Dalit movement. Poisoned Bread, edited by Arjun Dangle, is the first notable work of compilation of Dalit literature. In the introduction to the book, through his essay titled Dalit Literature, Past, Present and Future, Dangle says about Ambedkar's contribution for the emergence of Dalit literature. I quote, Dr. Ambedkar shaped the tradition of revolutionary thinking of almost a generation of Dalits who can today hold their heads high thanks to him. The literary manifestation of this social awareness is Dalit literature. I decode. Indeed, Dalit literature or Dalit writings were not given importance for centuries together in the society and in academics. Now it is gaining importance gradually in academics and even in society. The pain, agony, and anguish of Dalit writers and humiliation they experienced became subject of Dalit literature. To put in the words of Rajkumar in his Dalit personal narratives, he says, there, I quote, Their writings are letters of their own blood, a natural outburst of the feelings and thoughts which have been blocked up for centuries. ID quote. They recorded the apathetic and doleful past of Dalits to inform the future generations about what happened to them in the history. Autobiography is a major genre that Dalit writers succumb to write. The life they lived is reality. The reality recorded in writing. U.S. Saranya, in conclusion, in her thesis titled Narratives of Deconstruction, a post-colonial study of select Dalit novels, suggested that subcaste issues will also be given priority, and the subgrouped Dalits whose fictions are in oral languages need to be translated, and research will be carried out on such works. Madigas are one such community whose literature should be studied and explored. Madigas are one major group in Dalits located in southern states of India, particularly in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Karnataka. Madigas are cobblers by profession and making tapu, in English drums, with the leather. With the leather is their skill. Madigas have great and notable history. In his preface to the book Cultural History of Madigas, a brief study edited by Thalapala Manohar and Dr. Pasunuri Ravinder, the recipient of Kendriya Sahitya Academy Yuva Purushkar, stated that, I quote, the grandeur of Madiga community is unique, right from Adi Jambavan to Jagjivan Ram. I quote. Generally, there will be a serious cause for any movement and any literary war. Coming to the serious writings of Madiga literature, we need to know about a few things. Dalit literature in Andhra Pradesh went its soaring heights after Karam Chedu and Sunduru slaughters. They are the massacres of Dalits by feudal landlords. Madigas are victims of Karam Chedu and Malas are the victims in Sunduru incidents. After the Karam Chedu incident, Dalit Mahasabha was started to fight against atrocities on Dalits. Talking about Dalit Mahasabha in his book Caste, Class and Social Articulation in Andhra Pradesh, Mapping Differential Regional Trajectories, Professor K. Srinivasulu wrote, I quote, the formation of Dalit Mahasabha in 1985 following the Karam Chedu massacre is a crucial development in the recent history of Dalit politics and literature. In the course of time, with this demand of classification and scheduled caste reservations, the new movement came into light in Dalit movement's history. This movement is famously known as MRPS, Madiga Reservation Porat Samiti. MRPS was formed on 7th July 1994 under the leadership of Mandakrishna Madiga. Then onwards, the writers in the Madiga community started writing for the rights of Madigas and the classification of scheduled caste reservations according to their respective population. Talking about the division between Mala and Madiga movements groups, Professor T. Bharati wrote in her book, A History of the Telugu Dalit Literature, I quote, subsequently under the banner of Dandora, Madigas started writing the history of Madigas and how they are backward under the non-division. I quote. Mr. B. Gopal opines that undoubtedly the cultural practices of any society can be read through literature. I quote. As such, Madiga writers started writing about classification after the inception of Dandora movement. Later, they started writing about culture and history. Nagapagare Sundararaju is a prominent writer in them during that time. He felt the need for a separate wing for Madigas to bring the literature into the context and for social debate. He edited a book entitled Madiga Chaitanyam, published by Madiga Sahitya Vedika, Andhra Pradesh University of Hyderabad in 1997. There are 25 poems in it, and it is a collection of poems by Madiga poets. Professor Kalakaluri Inak, a popular Dalit writer, wrote forward to it. The Madiga Sahitya Vedika is believed to be the brainchild of Sundararaju. In his preface to Madiga Chaitanyam, he explained the injustice done to Madigas in detail. Knowing after that, knowing after what is happening in their history and culture, Madiga writers wrote their past history and glory. Raju's book, Cultural History of Madigas, A Brief Study, is one such example to know their history and culture, their profession, and how skilled they are in making chapels and making dapus, in English, in translation, drums, out of leather. Now they are writing back and rewriting their past. Authors contributed to this book are Akupalli Kumaraswamy, Tigala Srinivas, Padigipalli Krishna, Tallapalli Manohar. In that book, songs like Madigola Dappuluchele and Madigola Dappuluchele, Manava Hakkulu Danduresele in Telugu. In English, Madiga drums came for human rights, conveyed the long history of Madiga communities' history to the society. Credit must go to Madiga Dandora movement. Writers and critics have expressed their opinion on Dandora and its impact of Dalit literature and society. The writer and critic and translator of Dalit literature, a well-known academician, K. Purushottam, expressing his views on Telugu Dalit literature, stated in his article, Evolution of Telugu Dalit Literature. He says that, I quote, this Madiga group also writes about the satellite castes. I decode. It is true that without the inclusion of Dalit literature, we cannot say that Indian literature is fulfilled. Same is the case with Madiga literature. In case Dalit literature, as they are representing the low-ranked community in Dalits. In Andhra Pradesh, the dominant castes like Kamma, Reddy, Kapu, and others, and add their names, add their caste names to their names. After the emergence of Madiga Dandora movement, Madigas started adding their caste name to their names. Dr. Kaluva Mallaya, in his novel Madiga Vijayam, in English, Madiga Victory, opines that it is an act of self-respect for them. With the inspiration given to them by Madiga writers, a few from subcastes started representing themselves through writing. Enluri Sudhakar is one who writes about subcastes. He is Madiga by caste and he wrote for Madiga and subcastes too. He authored Malle Moggala Godugu, in English, an umbrella of jasmines, which centered on the life of Madigas. To sum up and to conclude, Madigas who are ranked low among society, after getting education, they write back their history, their culture, and even their future aspirations. The Madiga movement was accepted by everyone. The literature produced out of this movement by Madigas is still in its native vernacular. This is high time to translate them into English. The writings of Madigas are now phenomenon in terms of their subject matter. Writing about atrocities and experiences are the common features in Dalit writings. Madiga literature focused on issues like social justice, history and culture, identity and communities, and issues like rewriting of the past and representation in present. Thank you for giving me this great opportunity to present my paper. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Rasool Prabhakar. It was a good presentation. The paper began with the Dalit Panthers and how Dr. Ambedkar's influence on Dalit writers made it possible for them to voice for the voiceless. You also drew attention towards the serious literature that emerged after Dalit massacre by landlords. The Madiga writers have raised voice for the marginalized and the oppressed people of the community. Madiga drums came for rights, you said. You also presented the significance of Madiga Dandora movement. I believe and hope that the translation of Madiga writers and their works will make it to the global scenario. Thank you, Dr. Rasool, for the presentation. It was good and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I invite Mrs. Sushila Victor, Associate Professor of English, KG College of Arts and Science, Coimbatore, to present her paper, Art, Literature and Film as Modes of Expression and Resistance.
A pleasant evening to one and all present in this online platform. I wouldn't take a long time to present mine. Just, it is true, art, literature, and film are the modes of expression and resistance. That is very true. I would like to present a PPT to explain this. Yeah, this is Fourth World Literature. And this is the paper presented, Art, Literature and Film as Modes of Expression and Resistance. I am Sushila Victor, Associate Professor, KG College of Arts and Science, Saravanampatti, Coimbatore. Now, it is true, from the time immemorial, it is seen and felt that art, literature, and film play a vital role in expressing the various feelings of man, like faith, frustration, gratitude, grief, identity, joy, love, opinion, outrage, regret, sympathy, thought, and so on. From the primitive man till the present man, the ways of thinking and behavior seem to be the same, and they would like to express their feelings and everything, and they want to express. Is that true? Isn't it? And also we find the mankind found the cave painting art as a mode in the beginning. Before they formed languages, art was the mode of expression. They expressed through art. Art evolved as a byproduct of human skills. Art is the symbolic form of communication raised out of man's aesthetic pleasure. Through art, the historic, mythological, religious, and all the other expressions are very well expressed, and they are also used for resistance. Now, once I visited Wayanadu in Kerala, a place called Edakal Cave. It was on a hill. We were climbing and climbing. When we reached there, I was really surprised to see two big caves. There we found the number of and so many rock paintings and engravings. And it was done by the people called Siddha, the saints, long, long before. It was so beautiful, and I felt that it was not waste climbing such a big hill and see those things. So people in even old age, Stone Age man, and even others in the later period also, they used art as a mode of expressing their thing. The thinking and behavior, everything are same between both, that is the earlier man and present. For example, the caves of Sangankal rock hills in South India, Ajanta Ellora caves, Madurai Meenakshi Amman temple, and Pragadishwara temple in Tanjore. All those speak about these kind of things, and they are very surprising. So the next thing what I would say is the literature. Literature is also a mode of expression, and poetic literature is the extraordinary perception of the ordinary. Poetry is an imaginative awareness of experience. It enhances creative writing. It also develops creative imagination. For example, when you are reading The Solitary Reaper, the daffodils written by Wordsworth, and Passing by the Woods on a Snowy Evening by Frost, Telephone Conversation by Wole Soyinka, The Dying Eagle by E.J. Pratt. How beautifully the expressions are shown through this poem. But one thing I tell you, These days, I very much doubt whether the teachers express the poetry teaching in a better manner. Do they express that through the children and ask them to do better creative writing? Do they ask them to recite with intonation and stress? Do they ask them to compose small poems? That is very much lacking. Maybe it is due to the syllabus that we are having that makes us feel heavy over the children, isn't it? And poetic literature is an extraordinary perception of the ordinary. Poetry is an imaginative awareness of experience, experience through meaning, sound and rhythmic language. It enhances creative writing of short stories, dramatic scenes, and develop creative imagination in children. So when we read that Solitary Reaper, we find the sad note that the author has felt. The daffodils when he came to lie down, he finds that happy scene in front of him. So we find the literature also play a vital role in bringing the expression and also resistance. Drama, novels, and short stories too are very expressive and resistant. Ole Soyinka's The Lion and the 12, actually when we read that, it's a small play, but when we read that, we can feel the expression of every character which Ole Soyinka has brought in through his writing. And also I would quote the Bible in the Old Testament, the book of Job, the chapters 3, 7, 8 really tells it is something great. And the way Job expresses his agony and the pressure is really, really expressive and really good to know. Jesus, in the New Testament of the Bible, the words talked by Jesus on the cross, that is really touching. The expression is so deep, anybody could feel it and they could cry when they hear it. So literature plays a vital role. Literature, any poetic literature, drama, art, novel, short stories, whatever it is, they always present this kind of better things. We can feel that all these things in our lifetime. And of course, I feel the present form of film or the real source of expression and resistance. From the beginning, films are used as sources of expression. The movie like Sound of Music, Far from the Madding Crowd, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, Antony and Cleopatra, or very great expressive movies. The film shot having the themes of struggle for independence really evoked the feeling of independence in the minds of Indians. The film Gandhi, the scene of Jallianwala Bagh massacre, brought such an emotion in the minds of people, isn't it? The film Veerapandiya Kattabomman, Kappalotiya Tamilan, or still emotional movies that could make people emit their sense of patriotism. And of course, I would say, I would like to compare the modern film, Fourth World literature. We are now to think about Fourth World literature. In which way the movies of present day go along with the olden movies. There was the olden movies, if you think about, the name itself has given a moral, a virtue that a person could follow. We never found a hero acting differently. Hero is always a hero. He was posed as hero. We don't know what were their personal life like, but they posed themselves as heroes. But what happens in these Fourth World? What kind of movies our children are seeing? Are they not resisting and compromising and say that what they do is right? They do. That is what they say. It is come in the movie. Why are you asking us? That is what they say. So, in order to make things better, I would say olden movies versus modern movies, both are expressive in their own way. The songs, body language, facial expression, and actions are very expressive in old movies. They express justice, love, sharing, and all virtues through names, actions, and speeches. But are the modern movies are so? We'll have to think it is high time. The present COVID crisis makes our children not facing any of their teachers. The second parents, the teachers, are not facing the students. The students do not have any advice or any good speeches from the teachers. It is high time that we'll have to think how the fourth world pictures or movies or literature do something good for the present generation. I would like to complete here that we are to think about and to accept that it is true. Art, literature, and films are used as modes of expression and resistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sushila Victor. Your presentation was very good. You began the presentation by explaining how painting is a powerful mode of expression and art form. You almost took us on a tour to Wayanad Cave Paintings and Tanza Temple. You also presented on how literature is a mode of expression. It's true that poetry is an imaginative awareness of experience. You passed from your presentation on literature to film. No doubt movies are a very powerful mode of expression. Your paper covers the artistic expression of the ancient man to modern man. Thank you, Dr. Sushila, for your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now I invite Vishnupriya CV, Research Scholar, Department of English, St. Thomas College, Thrissur, Kerala, India, to present a paper on the birth of a tragic heroine, Sita, from Valmiki's Ramayana in the perspective of Aristotle. Now, CV Vishnupriya, you can present your paper.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope I am audible and the slides are visible. So, due to the hello, am I audible?
Yes, Priya, you're audible.
Okay. So, due to the time constraints, let me directly move to the topic. That is the birth of a tragic heroine, Sita in Valmiki Ramayana in the perspective of Aristotle. Thus, the paper today attempts to update the concept of tragic hero put forward by Aristotle in his Poetics, finding a female counterpart, that is Sita in Valmiki Ramayana. Thereby, it also evaluates the role and responsibility of the former, that is Sita, in contributing to the tragic atmosphere of the epic. Then, referring to the unity of plot, Aristotle, in chapter 9 of his treatise of Poetics, asserts, unity of plot does not, as some persons think, consist in the unity of the hero. In other words, only those actions, not all, in the life of the hero, which are intimately connected with one another and appear together as one whole, provides structural unity to tragedy. So, as far as the plot of Ramayana is concerned, Rama, Prince of Ayodhya, appears as the central point. Every action springs from Rama and ends in Rama as well. Then, what is the relevance of Sita should be put to question. It is clear that the observation of Gregory G. Alt in his text called the Iliad, the Ramayana, failure of persuasion and religious mystification becomes significant. He says, Valmiki enters the refining narrative of the Ramayana as a problem and resolution story, not an occasion and demonstration one. The problem uplifts the entire world and it requires the entire narrative for its resolution. An analysis of the plot of Ramayana would reveal that the moral dilemma arouses in the life of Rama has significantly affected as well as uplifted the world around him, or at least the people around him. The individuals associated with his life, namely Dasharatha, Kaikeyi, Sumitra, Kausalya, people of Ayodhya and Bharata, among them, the individual who underwent immeasurable affliction was Sita. Rama had decided to abandon the kingdom and go to the forest. Sita followed him. And it marks the beginning of a series of prolonged affliction, not only for Rama, but also for Sita. And the ethics of humanism in the Ramayana, Sita's perspective, presented at the 14th International Conference on Ramayana, states, the order to leave the kingdom was for Rama, not for Sita. She joins him with a ready smile. Yet it is Sita who punished for what happened. She got abducted, causing immeasurable pain and hardship. But Sita grows from strength to strength as she goes through the lack of return in Ravana's kingdom, holding on to the one and only principle, truth embedded in faith. So both of them, Rama and Sita, united in truth and faith, encountered the moral dilemmas in their lives, exhibiting similar degree of emotion, pain, anxiety, hope, and devotion. This qualifies Sita to be called the heroine or the reflection of Rama himself in the Ramayana. Then, proceeding further, what makes Sita a tragic heroine in the epic? So, on the status of a heroine, what transforms Sita to the status of a tragic heroine? To answer this, let us consider the definition of an ideal tragic hero by Aristotle as put forward in his Politics and evaluate the scope of finding the scope of fixing the former in that framework. So as far as Aristotle is concerned, he says, the ideal tragic hero, he must be who is highly renowned and prosperous. The change of fortune should not be from bad to good, but reversely from good to bad. So the hero who is fortunate and renowned should fall from fortune to a bad state. So this is what Aristotle says. Then let's consider the life of Sita and analyze various phases of her life to know how this is applicable in Sita's life, or if there is how to apply this in Sita's life. Initially, in the first phase of her life, that is marked by childhood and marriage, she was tended in royal care and married with the mightiest person of Aryavata. So it was a period of fortune for her. It was followed by her life in forest and abduction by Ravana. So from fortune, she was brought down to a bad state. And in the third phase, we have Rama's victory in the war and Sita's reunion with Rama and her installation being the queen of Ayodhya. So from the bad fortune, she was again elevated to the good fortune, and what followed was her life in Vaikuntha ashram and her decision to return to the lap of Mother Earth. So from good fortune, again she was brought down to the world. So coming back to Aristotle, what he said was the state of fortune should be from good to bad. So in the case of Sita, the change of fortune was initially from good to bad, then from bad, she again was resorted to a good position, then a worse position. So in the case of Sita, it was a mixture. Moving further, Aristotle says this downfall or the change of fortune should come about as a result not of vice, but of some great error or frailty in a character, either such as we have described or better rather than worse. So Sita was brought down to a worse state, not as a result of a her character. So moving further, what was the frailty in Sita's character? And in this here, we should also consider the individual role and responsibility of Sita in contributing to the tragic atmosphere of the plot as a whole. Analyzing the major choices that she has made in her life, it is evident that what she has been followed is what her ancestors have taught her. They had already instructed her the need for the wife to be always there to serve the husband. In Ayodhya Kanda, she says this to Rama. And as Devdutt Patnaik, the famous Indian mythologist, in his work called Sita, an illustrated retelling of Ramayana, says that Janaka told his daughter, that is Sita, to bring happiness to the marriage rather than seek happiness from it. So what has been taught and transmitted by way of tradition, what has been written in the scriptures and social situations has to be altered for the common good. For instance, Urmila had never insisted Lakshmana that she should accompany him to the forest, instead remained patiently in Ayodhya for years. As for her, the will of Lakshmana matters the most. So this excessive adherence to societal norms and dogmas later led Sita to commit an irrevocable error of misconception. In the Aranyakanda, when Rama attempted to capture the golden deer, Sita hears a loud scream which sounds similar to her husband's voice. She forced Lakshmana to leave and begin to pray for the protection of Rama, uttering undesirable words. So the quotation is already in the screen, but due to time constraints, I'm just skipping the quotation. But she says, "O wicked and cruel one, always act in a colorful way towards their rivals and hide their true character." So what Sita has been intending is that Lakshmana is hiding his true character. Then, when Lakshmana left heritage in search of Rama, Rama entered, disguised as a sannyasi. She, who blamed this innocent Lakshmana, pure intention and devotion as a rival hiding the true color, failed to realize the true color of the true rival disguised as pure in intention. R. Sadashiva Iyer, in his article called The Ramayana in the Light of Aristotle's Poetics, published in the Journal of the University of Bombay, explains, and this is very ironical. Even when Ravana, in his role of pseudo-sannyasi, praises her physique and sounds like a poet of the fleshy school, no suspicion of base motive enters her mind. Mark the other note. While she suspected Lakshmana, she doesn't suspect Ravana. So, on final note, the tragedy of Sita springs from the choices she made in the pivotal points of her life, inspired by her excessive adherence to the societal norms and dogmas. Thank you.
When a tragic hero was born, the world celebrated him for so long. Your paper presented a female perspective which Aristotle or even Valmiki have not even thought of. The male always plays a central role and the woman is pushed to the periphery. It has always been Prince Rama's story and never Princess Sita's. Her opinion never mattered to the entire community. The onus fell on her to help Prince Rama carry out his princely duty. Ms. Priya, it was a very good presentation and all the best for your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Now I invite Mamta Abral, research scholar, OPJS University, to present her paper on Education and its Multidimensional Role for Empowerment of Women, a review. Now, Ms. Mamta?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. So my topic is education and its multidimensional role for empowerment of women. Education is a constitutional right and a requirement for everyone. Human development is crucial to the general expansion of the social economy since it reduces inequality and promotes the individual's well-being. When it comes to attaining gender equality, women empowerment is the most important factor. Documents relevant and easily available to the role of women empowerment in education have been identified and a record analysis performed. And education is a powerful tool for women to fully participate in the growth process with the knowledge, skills, and self confidence accessible to them. Trainees are also able to take control of their life and have more negotiating power. They are also able to be happy moms and have healthier marriages. Women's rights and duties as members of society are enhanced through education. Because of this, they are able to make more meaningful judgments in terms of political involvement and making life decisions. In this way, education may benefit from growing self-efficacy, self-confidence, decision-making capacity, and increasing gender parity in organizations and institutions. So, introduction. Any person's access to an education is a constitutional requirement and a fundamental right. People are helped by it and it has an influence on the general growth of the social economy since it reduces inequalities. The benefits of greater literacy and education include better health, better nutritional status, economic growth, and population decrease, and the empowerment of the poorer sectors and society as a whole. Empowerment of women refers to the process of enhancing women's socio-economic, economic, cultural, and political standing within society, which has been repressed and disregarded for a long time. Females are more likely to spend a considerable amount of their household income on children's health and education. According to a large number of research studies, winning gender equality requires women's empowerment defined as people's duty, rights, and opportunities being unaffected by a person's gender. When women are empowered, they have more control over their lives. As a result, education is the most powerful weapon for transforming society. In various opinions, empowering women and equipping nations for all-round economic growth is a key topic to consider. Women continue to engage in economic activities even as they prepare for equal access to education and equal rights. When it comes to enhancing women's living situations, education is one of the most important aspects. Lack of education for women has a number of unintended consequences such as reduced employment opportunities and family income as well as the potential of being exploited. Especially in developed countries, women are concerned about unused human capital. As a result of their education, they have the ability to make decisions and influence societal change. Anyone may benefit from a good education, but girls and women are especially in need of it. In addition to being a stepping stone to success, women's educational accomplishments inside the family and cross generations have far-reaching repercussions. A woman's position in society may be enhanced most effectively through education. Women in education. Since education is a multiplier right in international law and policy, those who have it can exercise many other human rights. It is widely acknowledged that girls' education plays a key role in establishing substantive equality between men and women, and that it is also an effective way to enhance political, global health, cultural, economic, and social development results. As a practical matter, however, the right to education is hampered by a number of difficulties. When it comes to schooling, girls face a number of obstacles that guys do not have to deal with. Women's educational attainment was examined in 18 low and middle income countries by the World Bank. For the children and their families, as well as for the economy, it was a win-win situation for everyone involved. We know from past research and experience that universal secondary education contributes to empowerment and progress. Investment in girls' education has long been touted as the panacea to the myriad problems facing the world's poorest nation. Educating women, indicators of empowerment. Education is one of the most important markers of women's status and gender equality, according to a study by the University of Michigan, because it equips them with necessary abilities for making informed decisions in their everyday lives as well as negotiating for training empowers women. Education of the mother has a bigger impact on a children's financial security than education of father. Female college graduates have better nutrition and usage of healthcare for themselves and their children, lower fertility rates compared to those with lesser levels of education. There is both absolute and measurable education indicators. In order to assess the gender differences in education, governments and international organizations frequently rely on the gender parity index and absolute gender gap because data patterns origins are not easily evident, these computations may lead to data misinterpretations. A drop in boys' school attendance or an increase in female enrollment faster than male enrollment may lessen the gender gap as put a decline in both genders' enrollment, with the male rate declining faster than that of the females. The absolute degree of success is therefore not captured by this matrix. It is possible for national averages to obscure subnational variance and to obscure differences across classes, racial groups, and regions. A gender equity indicator was created by UNDP to measure gender equity and accomplishments. To begin, let's look at the two primary categories of schooling metrics. This group includes literacy, educational attainment, and school attendance. Examples of education system interventions include enrollment, educational facilities, and curriculum. Indicators of educational attainment are different. Using adult literacy rates and average years of schooling, we can determine the total amount of human capital. These ratios are used to measure how well a school system performs based on its enrollment. As a measure of educational access, school enrollment rates are used, and education systems' internal productivity and educational cycle flows are determined by survival, completion, and repeat rates as well as dropout rates. After taking into account a child's enrollment rate at any given age, the likelihood of him or her enrolling in school at the age is calculated. Indicators of women empowerment vary, but all of them serve as standards for programs that attempt to achieve fairness and equality for women in education. When it comes to female instructors, for example, the proportion will show how powerful female teachers are in encouraging young women to pursue further education. To achieve gender equality and reduce poverty, education is essential. More life expectancy, lower crime rates, and increased social cohesiveness all contribute to an overall increase in social well-being. In order to escape the cycle of poverty and ensure social stability, women's education is essential. The more educated women are, the more access they have to resources, more employment possibilities, and the better capacity they have to make informed decisions regarding their health, marriage, and children's upbringing and development. Now, gender-responsive education system. Gender-based discrimination remains one of the most persistent obstacles to fulfilling the right to education. According to the 2000 Education for All, that is EFA, Framework for Education for All Framework for Action, that is EFA, education for all will not be feasible unless this obstacle is overcome. Malgré change in environment, attention to women's rights concerns remains a significant component of the global agenda. World Education Forum delegates in Incheon, Korea in 2015 reaffirmed the goal of EFA, which was first articulated in Thailand 20 years ago and reinforced at Dakar, Senegal a decade later. A gender-sensitive approach to education in the classroom is essential to addressing current inequalities between genders and ensuring that future generations of children have equal chances in school and work. When children are taught in a safe and accepting atmosphere, they are more likely to succeed in their studies. Students are encouraged to question current gender stereotypes and pursue their hobbies regardless of social gender roles. Multidimensional role of education for women empowerment. First one is personal empowerment. Female empowerment may be achieved by education which equips women with necessary information, skills, and self-confidence. A major component in empowerment is unquestionably education, but the two don't necessarily go hand in hand. Women education had a positive impact on their children's cognitive development. Women's quality of life is increased by improved cognitive skills, which have a number of additional positive effects on their lives. Second one is relational empowerment. Increased social interaction among female program recipients leaders, and community members, according to studies, tends to improve communication, and that contact may stimulate the flow of information and induce substantial behavioral and attitudinal changes. Studies have found that educated women are more engaged in making informed judgments regarding their personal life. There have been numerous instances where competent women in undeveloped nations have profited from political campaigns when they are educated. Studies also suggest that women nations with a high level of education are more likely to have a democratic government. As long as she educated, a woman can fit into any class or society. Training also helps women find a better work-life balance, improve their negotiating power, and be better moms with better relationship with their spouses. Thanks to their training, a mother's schooling makes her more aware of her responsibilities to her children. As long as moms are well trained, their offspring will develop and learn fast. When it comes to educating their children, Nigerian mothers often sacrifice fundamental requirements like excellent food, respectable clothing, fantastic chances, and comfort for the sake of their children's education. They realize the value of education and are prepared to make any sacrifices for their children. Next one is social empowerment. When women are empowered, they may fight against their absolute position or relative gender discrimination. It is predicted that certain parts of empowerment would need the acceptance of extreme methods. Because of this, it is important that both men and women have the freedom and ability to travel freely. Determining which gender has greater influence doesn't take into account that both men and women have limited liabilities. Stating that true state of women's life is more essential than anything else. Men are better at analyzing other aspects of women's empowerment though. A good education prepares women for a decent human existence and helps them become aware of their rights in society. It is likely that the most common types of violence against women, such as child marriage and dowry, will be quickly and easily challenged in court. When women are educated as members of society, they may exercise their rights and responsibilities. You can make better judgments about political involvement and your life with this information at your fingertips. According to Chandra, women education has a major impact on societal progress. Some of the most notable societal advantages include reduced birth rates and child death rates, as well as lower maternal mortality rates. If the gender gap in education can be closed, it will also lead to greater gender equality. Now, conclusion. Educating yourself is one of the most essential things you can do to improve your chances of success in life. Assists the person in minimizing inequalities and plays a vital role in human development, which influences the overall expansion of the social economy, economic growth, nutritional status, better health outcomes, population control, and empowerment of the disadvantaged parts of society may all be attributed to higher literacy and education levels in a certain area of the country. There are also many aspects of its worth. Some of the empowerment are relational empowerment with people, negotiating and decision-making power, personal empowerment, and social empowerment like self-efficacy, self-confidence, self-awareness. After reviewing many studies regarding women empowerment, especially women should have equal access to educational opportunities. Women's education is important because it educates society and contributes much to the progress of a nation. Thank you. Thank you so much.
The paper concentrated on how knowledge, skills, and education help women in their upliftment. It also presented on how gender bias is a hurdle to education of women. It is very important to have a multidimensional education system to emancipate and empower women. Education and can help a woman become a better version of herself in the multiple roles she plays. Thank you, Ms. Mamta, for the paper on education and the multidimensional role of empowerment of women in review. So all the best for your future endeavors. Thank you, Mamta.
Thank you.
Now I invite Dr. Sachishore, Assistant Professor, Department of English, PGSP University, Rajouri, Jammu and Kashmir, and the joint writer, Mr. Parveen Kumar, Research Scholar, Department of English, PGSP University, Rajouri, Jammu and Kashmir.
Now I invite you to present the paper Love Shall Rest in Peace, Interfaith Marriages in Hindi Cinema. You can start presenting the paper. Mr. Praveen Kumar, are you there? Shinu, could you please verify if Praveen Kumar is ready to present the paper?
He is not present.
Okay then. Thank you participants for the wonderful presentation. We all had a nice time listening to the presentations. It was worth listening. Now, the session has come to an end. I hand over the session to Mr. Sino. Thank you all. Bye.